Thank you for attending the Stop Smart Cities Town Hall. My name is Pastor John Padula, and I will be your MC for the evening. First off, I want to personally thank each and every one of you for participating tonight, all of the challengers and incumbents and everybody in the audience. And I just want to be really upfront about this, that there will be absolutely zero rude comments, no division. We're going to do this. We're going to have a good time, and we're going to get to know each other. Amen? All right. There's a lot of people in this building today with a lot of different opinions. As we have witnessed across this nation and even here in our own community, the difference of opinions has led for a deep hatred for one another. But I say here in Kootenai County, we can do better. I say whether we agree on certain policies or not, we need to be able to sit together and do our best to lead this community. There was a time not long ago when conservatives and liberals and Democrats and Republicans could sit together and get things done without all of the division. We need to be the community that leads this nation back to that type of unity. By no means am I saying that we need to support policies we disagree with or compromise our own personal values, but we can start loving each other and encouraging the people we disagree with, and we can vote for or against certain policies without all of the added drama. The hatred and violent opposition is destroying the very fabric that this great nation was built on. And this is how the younger generations are being shown how we deal with opposition, violence, and hatred. But I say enough is enough. Let's be a light for the rest of this nation. Let's be an example for the other communities, and let's show them that we can work together even when we disagree. Also, I want to invite all of the candidates and the challengers to come to the altar Sunday, November 5th at the 8:30 and 10:30 services so we can pray over all of you before the election. In Psalm 133:1, it says this, "Behold, how good and how pleasant it is for brethren to dwell together in unity." Let's pray. Father, we come to you in the name of Jesus, and we want to thank you that you've given us the ability to be a participant in this election. I pray, Father, that you'd give us wisdom and discernment. I pray that you'd lead our steps, that you'd lead our decisions for the benefit of the people in our community. And I pray that you would anoint the leadership, that you would give them the ability to lead with integrity, with honor, and make sure that above all things that the name of Jesus is lifted up in our community. We glorify you in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. Stop Smart Cities is a grassroots organization. Looks like my time's up. Stop Smart Cities is a grassroots organization established to educate the residents of North Idaho on issues related to the United Nations Agenda 21 and smart cities. North Idaho, like most other American cities, is under the influence of a government that is determined to strip common people of their rightful liberties and turn our cities into open-air prisons. Advanced surveillance technology is transforming how we live. It's destroying our freedoms and invading our privacy. And we are determined to stop it. Stop Smart Cities members have been making presentations and hosting events to help spread awareness and make people wake up to this threat. For more information or to sign up for emails, please visit the Stop Smart Cities website at www.stopsmartcities.com or visit the Stop Smart City table in the foyer following the event. How the candidate forum will be organized. Greetings, candidates. Thanks again for participating in the Stop Smart Cities Candidate Forum. We will now discuss how the town hall will be organized. We will start with short introductions of about 1 minute, then proceed with questions. There are 9 candidates, and we would like to hear from each candidate without being repetitive. Therefore, we've come up with 12 questions based on input from residents over the last week. Each candidate will be asked to answer 1 question from each of the 4 categories. Candidates may take up to 2 minutes to answer, and once they have addressed their question, they may use their time to comment on related issues. The 4 major categories of questions are these. Number 1 is urban growth. Number 2 is smart city technology. Number 3 is central planning and land use. Number 4 is general city government. Stop Smart Cities is focused on the technical aspects of surveillance cities, but the way cities manage growth is of concern to many people, and it is closely related to smart cities. For this reason, about half of our questions deal with growth and urban development. Following the questions, the candidates will have time to give closing remarks, and at the end of the forum, they will be available to answer individual questions out in the church foyer. Now, without further ado, we'd like to ask each of the candidates for CDA and Hayden City Government to introduce themselves, and you will each be given 1 minute. And we'll start on this side with Christy Wood. Yes, ma'am.
My minute taken? All right. I'm Christy Wood, and I'm a current Portland City Council member. No, can't hear. Well,
There you go.
technology. Thank you. Well, thank you for having me this evening. A little bit about myself. I'll speak really fast now. I'm an Idaho girl, lived here most of my life. I grew up here. When I was in my 20s, moved to the city of Coeur d'Alene, and I've raised my son here. My husband and I own a home here, and most importantly, I spent my career here. Whoopsie. Many of you might know me, not because I pulled you over, but because I've worked in law enforcement for 26 years here in the city of Coeur d'Alene. And so I'm deeply, deeply invested in this community. I've served on the Coeur d'Alene School Board for 8 years. I've served on the North Idaho College Board of Trustees for 18 years. And I've served on numerous committees involving the city. So I really believe that if you want to represent the community, you should be invested in it, and I am. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Christy. Next, we have Dan Gookin.
Oh, okay. And is there a light somewhere that when we get a warning light?
Right there.
Oh, great, okay.
Hi, I'm Dan Gookin, and the shortest acceptance speech for the Academy Awards was thank you. And I would like to say, if you want to read my bio, you can go to my website at dangookin.com. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dan. Dan English.
Okay, thank you. I'm Dan English, born and raised here, been around a long time, done a lot of different kinds of things. I'm very interactive with the community. I appreciate the opening remarks you had. I do believe, I know a lot of people, actually I know a lot of people that go to this church. My daughter and son-in-law go here, and folks from different points of view that certainly can reach some common ground, and we've done it before. So I appreciate that as kind of a leading light for us. Also, I wrote down that November 5th, the blessing of the candidates. Now, at our church, we're going to do a blessing of the animals in about 3 weeks, and so if you can't quite handle the people, go to that one. But okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have the Coeur d'Alene Council challengers, and we'll start with Brian Winkler.
Hi, everyone. Brian Winkler. I'm a Marine Corps officer. Throughout my professional career, I've lived in many different cities, and I've lived in San Francisco. I've lived in Omaha, Nebraska, and I've lived in Seattle, Washington. And one thing I've noticed is it's the same pattern in every city. And so I moved here. I invested in my home here, and been here. And I started working with Ed on Idaho Speaks, and I started talking to local leaders. And what I learned is that the same forces that affected all those other cities with the high density, the crime, all of those forces are at work here, right in Coeur d'Alene. And so that's why I'm getting involved in running at the local level and running for City Council Seat 1, because I do not want to see my community go in that same direction. And so, Teresa, this is a very important topic, and I just want to say thank you to you, because a lot of times when people bring this up, they say, oh, well, you're a conspiracy theorist for, thinking there's a global plan or, stuff like that. But so I just want to say thanks for your steadfastness and your courage for bringing this to the forefront of the community, and I'm really excited to talk about this tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Brian. Next, Clark Albritton.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Clark Albritton, and My wife and I moved here about 24 years ago in 1999, deliberately because we knew we could not raise our children in the San Francisco Bay Area. We already knew what was going to happen to that place. And so we moved here with my then one-year-old daughter, and then had an anchor baby in Coeur d'Alene, my son, who was born about 4 years after that. So I'm completely legit. You know, we've lived here and we've watched what's happened in this community. We love this place, but you know, we see that the conservative values that are represented by the majority of the voters in the city, they're just getting blown past by outside influence, governmental influence at the state and federal level, developers, outside developers, and the city council and the mayor, whatever their politics are, have allowed that to continue to a point where we need the people to speak up and say enough. And whatever that's going to take, that's the reason why I'm running for city council, because I'm going to be on that team that's going to say, we ain't going to do this the way we've been doing it, because we've been getting rolled over. And people say nice things to the people, and they get elected, and yet we get this woke nonsense, and we get the federal and state governments rolling us over at every level. That I've learned even more about Department of Transportation and ITS from you folks. And I'm just telling you, the voice of the people needs to be heard. And if I'm elected city council, it will be.
Thank you, Clark. Next is Roger Garlick.
For starters, thank you everybody for being out here on a Sunday night. When I see a crowd like this, especially for this topic, this is so important. This is one of the most important topics that we've been talking about for years. It didn't just start with this election cycle. This is something that has been trickling into our city. So I'm glad that there's so many community members out here. As he stated, my name is Roger Garlock. I'm running for Coeur d'Alene City Council seat number 5. I moved to this community 20 years ago. I met my wife here. We raised 2 kids, I guess those anchor babies, as Clark calls them. So I got 2 natural-born Idahoans. But really, when you look at an Idahoan, I had the Idaho mentality long before I moved here. You know, as soon as I moved here, this was home for me. And as soon as I moved to this community, I've been involved on the streets, hands-on involvement with the public, working for the betterment of Coeur d'Alene. And city council will be an extension of that work. And most of that is getting you guys involved with city council, really getting your voice heard. We've had a hierarchy and just a stranglehold on local politics for years. It's time that other people's voices are heard. Like I said, this stuff is not new. It's been trickling into our city, and it's important that we are all aware of it, and we elect people that have the guts to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Next is Rob Knutson.
Hi, good evening. I'm Rob Knutson, and this is my first run for an elected office. Also running for the very popular seat number 5 on the city council. I'd like to think that I'm a smart candidate. That word is overused. If everything's smart, then nothing is. My wife and I were welcomed to the community about 6.5 years ago. I've got a background in biology, science, and I work primarily with the utility industry in resolving environmental regulations and permitting issues. So I'm bringing a little bit of a different perspective. It's kind of non-traditional, a little bit more sciencey. This is a little scary because we're probably going to be touching on technocracy and things like that tonight. So, you know, where scientists and engineers replace politicians. So that can be a little scary, but I've got some insight into it, and I hope to be able to bring some interesting information to the discussion tonight. Thanks again for having me.
Thanks, Rob. Next, we have the Hayden candidates, starting with Luke Summer running for Hayden Mayor.
My name is Luke Summer, running for the mayor position in the city of Hayden. And one of the reasons that I'm running is I have watched for the past year what goes on at city council and many of the commission meetings that occur. And I am not happy with what I see as far as process. People's rights get squished. They don't have the right to speak when they should have the ability to speak. Process is not followed, and that's upsetting. My wife and I, my beautiful wife Rowena, and I just got back from a trip out of country. We went to Bremerton, Washington yesterday, and so we came back. This is a great place to be. One of the things that I have been really surprised by is how everybody talks like they're conservative, how everyone talks like they're listening to the people. Yet in survey after survey, in opinion piece after opinion piece, people say, we want lower density, we want slower growth. 68% of the people in the city of Hayden responded to a survey recently saying, we want lower density, we want slower growth, and that's not what we're getting. And yet the council pushes in the opposite direction and then tells us that they're doing the opposite. They tell us they're moving for slow growth and managed growth, and that's not what we're getting. So my role will be to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Next, we have Tom Schaefer for Hayden City Council.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tom Schaefer. I am a relative newcomer to Kootenai County, having literally fled in the middle of the night from Western Washington. No joke. And just a little bit about myself. I'm a former U.S. Air Force captain, and I've been working in the telecom and avionics industry for about 35 years as a designer and managing projects from concept to production. But why I'm here tonight and the things that I would like to emphasize come from the most recent experience which we all share. Now, prior to 2020, if I started mentioning smart cities and surveillance, even I would have called myself a nutter. But what we saw happen in 2020 literally flipped that paradigm on its face. And the things that we accepted for literal convenience were turned upon us and used as weapons against us. And I was one person who was left to say, I don't have any trust in the systems anymore, at least in places like over across the border in that other country that Luke referenced. And so now these subject matters, which we're going to talk about tonight, are very important because I don't want to see us here in Kootenai County literally give the tools and the keys over to the people in power that will end up being our jailers with technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. We had two candidates who couldn't join us tonight, so I'm going to read both of their statements. Alan Davis is running for Hayden Mayor against Luke Summer, and this is his statement. The topic of smart cities is obviously important to our citizens and runs contrary to the values of people in North Idaho that they cherish, including our independence and our freedom. Please relay my official position, which is no surveillance equipment, to include traffic cameras, will be installed in Hayden when I am elected mayor. That's Alan Davis. Next is Roger Satterfield, and he's running for Hayden City Council, seat 3, against Tom Schaefer, and this is his statement. Thank you for the opportunity of making a statement. I have no use for smart cities. They are an unnecessary invasion of privacy. The government already knows too much about us, so why add to it? I can think of a lot of other things that my taxes could be used for. I know federal money might be used, but that is still my tax dollars. All right, you guys ready to start? Topic number 1 is managing growth. These questions are intended to give candidates an opportunity to discuss their ideas about managing growth. But first, we want to explain the difference between smart growth and smart cities to avoid confusion. Smart growth is an approach to urban planning that attempts to curb sprawl by increasing residential density. It also promotes walkable neighborhoods, public transit, and urban forestry. On the other hand, smart cities are surveillance cities. They collect data from everywhere, spy on residents, and use technology to restrict movement. These are two very different issues. Question number 1, comprehensive plans. Both the Hayden and CDA comprehensive plans incorporate smart growth principles, and both anticipate a significant increase in density. What is your opinion of smart growth, and if you know of problems with your city's comprehensive plan, What would you like to see changed, starting with Dan Gookin?
Okay. Yeah, so we went through that comprehensive planning process and spent a ton of your money on it. And it had that stuff in there. It had walkability and stuff, which I pointed out during the meeting didn't really make a lot of sense because they're requesting that certain things happen in certain parts of the city that aren't really there. And one of the problems that we have with a comprehensive plan is that it's just a guide. It's just a suggestion. Case in point, one of the first things that came to us after the comprehensive plan was approved was this development on 15th Street. And they were using 3 acres of land, but only building on half an acre. So they wanted to spread the density out over the 2.5 acres they couldn't build on. And I pointed that out. I also pointed out that there wasn't enough parking. I also pointed out it was against the comprehensive plan. But the city council approved it anyway. I voted against it. I know other people voted against it as well for those reasons. And here's the thing. First of all, you always got to cite facts when you say stuff up here. Make sure you back up what you say with facts. So when that came to us, I voted no, because it was against the comprehensive plan and it wouldn't really work. It was putting a lot of people somewhere where there's going to be a problem because there's no parking. This is the impact of growth, is parking. The line at the grocery store, the line at your doctor's office. These are the big issues that face us with growth. None of that's addressed in the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan, I thought, was about density. It put it in the wrong spot, and that is why I voted against the Coeur d'Alene comprehensive plan. That's what you get from me. I'm going to stand up for you because I knew you didn't want that kind of density. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next, we have Tom Schaefer, same question.
Can you hear me? Cool, okay. So comprehensive plan, Hayden has its own, and matter of fact, I'm reviewing it right now, and it's 100 pages long. So I kind of ask you rhetorically, if you were very passionate about your city, how much time do you have to read a 100-page document, which is roughly sort of an outward symbol of an inward resolve of the city staff and then by association the council as well. Here's my point. And the current city council has admitted that their comprehensive plan is an evolving document, so they can change it at will. What they don't talk about, which is almost more important, are the zoning codes. And at the same time that they were updating the comprehensive plan for Hayden, they were also changing the zoning codes. And one of them in particular has to do with what they call mixed use and mixed residential. And this is, if you can imagine, apartment buildings and high density condos on top of commercial space. Kind of sort of sounds like Seattle, Portland, all those places that we don't want to become. What they did with the zoning codes is they took away the right of the people through the special use permit to have a say in what went on a particular piece of land, and they gave it to the developer by right. So while comprehensive plans are important because it lets you know what the city or the municipality is thinking about, you have to pay attention to the minutia and the stuff which is, you know, who wants to read zoning codes, okay? But that's where the important part resides. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next, Clark Albert.
So comprehensive plan is something that we spend a lot of money to do, and yet it's just suggestions. What I would really like to know is, what would make sense to look at is, what was the comprehensive plan that got us where we are today? And how do they compare? Are they vastly different? Are they similar? Did we arrive where we thought we would? Did we get what we paid for in those prior comprehensive plans? Is the exercise valuable and useful for the people to do? And who has the influence, the loudest, strongest voice in shaping that plan? Because you need to be the ones, or us, the citizens of Coeur d'Alene, need to have a larger voice in shaping that plan, apparently, because we've arrived at a place we don't want to be. So the question is, how do we not duplicate that with go-forward comprehensive plans if they don't relate. And so, for one, the density problem, we have zoning in place now, exceptions to it. The presupposition that we need to be driving toward a higher growth number is part of the problem. Growth is not a goal. Growth is something that occurs as a matter of market forces. It is not to be inflicted upon the community by some, state or national or World Economic Forum plan to relocate, classes of poverty in pockets of the United States and plan in advance to plug them into this government housing. And I'm glad that your smart growth calls that out, because that's what's being planned, and I don't think that's our voice pushing that. So whatever future comprehensive plan we're going to do should start from the premise that we're not planning deliberately to grow by importing poverty.
Thank you, Clark. Question number 2 has to do with residential densities. One way to fit more people into existing neighborhoods is to allow the development of duplexes, accessory dwellings, and townhomes in traditional single-family neighborhoods. The question is, what is your opinion on the issues of allowing multi-family housing in single-family neighborhoods? Starting with Christy Wood.
Thank you. Well, I am on the record, and I have a strong voting record when it comes to density. I've opposed numerous projects that don't make any sense. And I don't believe in trying to cram multifamily units into a residential neighborhood with single-family homes. And so I will always vote against that. There are some areas of town that are mixed-use. Some of that is market-driven. Just listening to what was said a few moments ago, I didn't recognize any of it. My time on council, which I'm just finishing my 4th year, I haven't spent any time planning any kind of cabal like that at all. What I have done is showed up to meetings. I come prepared, and I study the issues, and if I can have an impact, then I do everything I can to. For instance, the Cortair project you'll probably hear about tonight. I voted against it, others voted against it. There were a lot of reasons for that. Developers, they're not evil. They're people, the people that work construction are your neighbors. They're out there trying to earn an honest living, whether they're concrete pourers or they're doing the drywall, what have you. They're not evil. But the developer is trying to make the biggest bang for his buck. We all know that, council knows that, so they want to use every space of ground. It is up to us to push back on that. I prefer a single-family neighborhood. That's where I live. That's how, I have lived the entire time I've been in Coeur d'Alene. I grew up in the woods. I prefer that even more. But I'm not ever going to try to cram something into a neighborhood that doesn't make sense, that's offensive to the neighbors and changes the characteristic of a neighborhood. I'm not pro-density. And when we talk about smart cities, I'm not even sure I'm smart cities. It really takes a lot of digging down into that issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Next, Tom Schaefer. No, Luke Summer. I'm sorry. I was looking at the wrong question.
It's okay. I thought
Keeping you on your
I thought I
toes.
was getting a break. I was ready for it.
Thanks, Luke.
Repeat the question, please.
What is your opinion on the issues of allowing multifamily housing in single-family neighborhoods?
I'm again it. I think that what we have seen in the city of Hayden is a redefinition and a rezone that took place, which has allowed for more of that kind of development. And my opinion on single-family residential neighborhoods, the R1 residential neighborhoods, is that they should stay as single-family. We wouldn't want to have duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, or apartment complexes in there.
Thank you. Next, Brian Winkler.
Yeah, so I am opposed to putting multifamily housing on single-family units. I think it's important for people to have land. I think it's important for people to have families, people to grow vegetables in their backyard. I think that's really important. And when you add multifamily housing, I mean, a number of things happen. First it increases the traffic. We all know that's a problem here. And when you look at how the city is planning for this, they treat it as if it's a quota, as Clark said. And so the comprehensive plan, it isn't just a suggestion. It's something that they're looking at and working towards every day. So no, I think we should promote more single-family housing, give more families the opportunity to move in. And then when you also look at just what happens when you start adding multifamily housing units, it drives up the price, right? So, and it happens in every city, right? It comes the multifamily, the high density, and then come the federal subsidies, and everything, prices people out. When you add the developers in the mix, they're adding to that source of demand, which drives prices up. And again, and like what Christy said, yeah, developers aren't evil, and it's going to happen. Growth is going to happen. This is a very popular place to live. People want to move here. I moved here for that reason. So, yeah, we want to encourage single-family homes. We want to reduce high density, and yeah, that's where I stand on that.
Thank you. Question number 3. Low-income housing, and this is only for the Coeur d'Alene candidates. Many cities subsidize low-income housing either by working with local nonprofits, applying for federal grants, or by granting tax breaks to developers. What are the pros and cons of housing subsidies, and how active should Coeur d'Alene be in providing for workforce housing? Starting with Dan English.
Thank you. I don't see at the city level that is something, that we can't do, at least in my opinion, direct city level subsidies, but I think there are a lot of things that we can and should do to address the housing inventory, just actually on your last, question talking about, in my mind and growing up here in Coeur d'Alene, picturing, I don't see a duplex or like my grandmother lived in a little house next to the main house. I don't see those as multi-family. When you get above that, that's something different. But I think sometimes that's, reflection that, oh boy, that's going to get the renters in and stuff. And, renters are people too. And that's the only way a lot of folks can start out these days. So I think that, anything that we can do to encourage that. And I think there are some, partnerships that we can be active with that they're looking for, the workforce housing and some different things. So I think that we can and should be a good partner, but, not at a point where we're giving out, chits from City of Coeur d'Alene for part of the rent. So thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Rob Knudsen.
Can you hear me now? So this is this is kind of a loaded or a hot topic. I think there's a lot of concern with any sort of money that has strings attached that comes from any government, whether it's city, county, especially federal. We have a saying in our household that the source determines the use. If you're getting money from the federal government or any other government for that matter, you have limits on how you can spend that. If the concern is, especially in the context of this forum tonight, if the concern is trying to keep government and Big Brother out of our lives, any sort of subsidies that comes from government sources is likely not the best way to go. So I think there's a lot that can be done from the private side. Nonprofit, there's plenty of entities that endeavor to do that kind of thing and give people a leg up. Just today in the Coeur d'Alene Press, there was an article in the headlines talking about the updated housing availability and affordability study in Kootenai County. If you hadn't had a chance to look at it, I suggest that you do that. It demonstrates that it's a very, very complicated problem. There are so many factors involved in it. I think it's a little bit disingenuous to talk about or throw around affordable housing because the reality is there's really not a whole lot that you can do about it because of external market forces. What city governments can do is vote yes or no on different resolutions or council bills, and that's the only power that the government really has for elected officials. And I think upzoning is a big concern. I haven't heard anybody that I've talked to or anybody on the panel tonight that say, yes, we need higher density. We want more development. So that's my input. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Next is Roger Garlock.
So the first job I ever had when I moved to Coeur d'Alene was with St. Vincent de Paul, and they had transitional housing that was considered your low-income housing in Coeur d'Alene. There's a lot of nonprofits that currently do that. There's, really when I look at this question, it's how do you define low-income housing? And when I look at St. Vincent de Paul as an example that provided low-income housing, transitional is a key component there. It's all low-income housing is going to be high density. And how do you choose it? You choose it through a nonprofit. You choose it through government subsidies, percentages. There's a low-income housing apartment complex right there behind Winco. I believe it's about 30% of whatever you may be making at the time. There was a time that apartments are low-income housing. It's that first step into home ownership and generational living in a community. That's what apartments are for. So when you really look at it, of like, hey, how do you actually define low-income housing? There was a time I thought where I lived was low-income housing, and then we went through a couple booms, and my house is way overvalued. I don't understand what it's worth. Low-income housing, and one of the things we talked about, especially with density, one of the misnomers, and I heard somebody mention it over here, is the inventory. Have you guys seen prices go down as inventory has gone up? No, it's not happening. So the inventory real estate debate, that's a misnomer in that. So it's really, low-income housing doesn't stay low income for long. There's strings attached to it. It actually, a lot of times, will increase rent in several apartment complexes. Let's say they put a block aside for low-income housing with your federal grants or your Idaho housing money. It doesn't stay low income, and then after the developers are done making their money, it's a blight on the community. I know the police are going to hate that, and it's just, we have to find other solutions to low-income housing, and really that definition is part of it.
Thank you, Roger. Topic number 2, smart city technology. These questions address some of the smart technologies that are encroaching on our cities. The invisible force behind smart technology is a high-frequency radio wave called EMR, electromagnetic radiation, that can be harmful. Cell phones, smart meters, and Wi-Fi routers all generate EMR. 5G technology produces extremely high-frequency radio waves, which provide for mass data collection and greatly increases the amount of harmful EMR that floods our cities. Smart cities depends on 5G and FCC regulations protect the right of wireless companies excuse me, to install 5G towers in cities over the objections of the communities. Question number 4 is restrictions on 5G. This is also for Coeur d'Alene only. Federal laws make it difficult for cities to resist 5G towers. But Dalton Gardens received national attention when it rewrote its zoning ordinances to make building a 5G tower with the city cumbersome. Now Coeur d'Alene is facing the same problem, as Verizon is now proposing to install a 5G cell tower on 15th in Shattuck. Here's the question. If elected, would you be willing to craft ordinances to make building 5G towers difficult so that 5G projects such as Potlatch and Shattuck can be avoided? Brian Winkler.
Yes, absolutely. I think this is an issue that still is young and we don't know enough about it. And I have with me right here, I have some documentation from the International Commission on the Biological Effects of Electromagnetic Fields. And just reading off the very first statement, it's a quick fact sheet. RFR exposures are associated with a range of adverse health effects, including cardiomyopathy, carcinogenicity, DNA damage, neurological effects, increased permeability of the blood-brain barrier, and sperm damage. So, I mean, to me, this looks like a very credible study. So I do think we need to slow down and figure out, okay, what are the health effects here? Just like we need to slow down growth of the city. But when you look at how the city is handling this situation, we have a consultant we're paying for in the city, as far as I can see, called Iteris. And what Iteris does, okay, if you just look at you go to their website, moving smarter together. Only Iteris has what it takes to deliver on the promise of smarter infrastructure for a cloud-connected world. And then it has newsflash. Iteris expands capacity of Vantage detection platform with release of Vantage Next Max. So I mean, this is already here, and we're paying for it in the middle of a budget crisis. So I think we really need to look at, all the different channels where this is coming in. And yes, if I were elected, I would absolutely support looking at what Dalton Gardens has done and doing something very similar.
Thank you, Brian. Next is Clark Albritton.
Yes, civil government, one of the most fundamental responsibilities of the city council and the city government is the protection of the health and safety of its citizens. And yet the priority always goes to the guy with a lot of money because we're afraid he might sue us. The problem is with 5G is we don't know what the harmful effects are going to be. We're going to find out. And, I'll tell you, if you have tinnitus, it is pretty well understood that the same environment we're talking about will enhance that. Among other things, there are so many unknowns of health consequence related to it. And then when we ask the question, we've been given kind of a false narrative of why we need 5G. We've been given a false narrative. We've been told that it's because you need it for HD streaming to your mobile devices. But no one is using, we talked about this earlier, no one is using their mobile devices to stream HD. And so that premise kind of drops out. So now they're coming up with these other reasons. Well, we're going to connect everything under the sun, the highways, the ITS, and everything else is going to all communicate over this 5G, and that's why we need all that high power. And the problem with that is we don't even understand what their objective is, because the original objective was to deliver HD streaming, and that's not necessary. So what is it really? But primarily, we don't know the health consequences. So the answer is yes. This is one of those issues where, yeah, they might say we're going to sue you, but this is an issue of fundamental health and safety of the citizens that we're elected to serve, and that has to come first.
Thank you, Clark. Dan English.
Thank you. This is a tough issue because it's, like a lot of things with technology. Actually, I remember when I was in high school, a friend of mine had a Corvair convertible, and man, loved that car and everything. And then Ralph Nader came along and wrote this book about unsafe at any speed. If you have to be of a certain age to know about Corvairs. But there's things that, unintended consequences. But I mean, just the cell phones, there was a big deal for a while about, is a regular cell phone safe? And yet, I mean, we can't kind of live without it. And the 5G, I agree. We ought to have some caution. I really resent that the, federal government can tell us, that we can't regulate something like that. I tell you, I really resent our legislature telling us that we can't, regulate some of those things at a local level. So it's a tough thing, and I think, some caution is warranted. On the other hand, people, they depend on technology and the devices, and like during COVID and stuff, and the fact that people, like with our church, and like a lot of them, I mean, that you could stream services and stuff, and now you don't have to, but they do, because it just opened the door for all kinds of people shut in. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Question number 5, KMPO and roadway money. A great deal of smart technology, including surveillance cameras and smart traffic signals, comes into our cities through federal funding of transportation projects. And Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization, the KMPO, an agency which is supposed to help prioritize regional traffic projects, appears to be on board with the smart city agenda. The question is, Do you believe that KMPO can be reformed? And if not, how will you balance your city's need for federal money or federal road money with harmful federal transportation priorities? Luke Summer.
As far as the KMPO, the Kootenai Metropolitan Planning Organization, it's federally mandated that you have one. I think you're above 50,000 people in a city. The problem with it is it's an unelected government. The people don't get a chance to choose that they're going to be represented or not represented by them. And we have city governments, we have county governments, we have state governments, and we have federal governments represented by people who are chosen by the people. This is a form of government that is being superimposed upon us, I believe, without constitutional foundation. And it needs to be done away with. As far as the highway and traffic money, the federal government, every time you get money from the federal government, there are strings attached, tentacles like a wart that get into your body and you can't get away from it. When the transit center was being proposed, when they were still in process but not building it yet, back in 2018 when I ran for Kootenai County Commissioner, I said that I would revisit that issue. I didn't get elected, so I did not have a chance to do that. But there were strings attached. I went and read some of the federal regulations that were in there, and they were telling us what we could do and could not do on the buses involved in the transportation system. Whenever you've got federal government money involved, you've got the federal government involved in the state. With the federal power, it's limited by the 9th and 10th Amendments to the United States Constitution. We could drop 50 to 75% of our budget on a federal level if the federal government did only what it should do. The concerns that we should be able to address ourselves on a state level and on a county level and on a city level should be dealt with by us without state interference, and we should not seek that money. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Rob Knutson.
Well, I agree with what Luke had to say. I would only add that I think KMPO should come back as a radio station. I've been working for weeks on that material, so thanks for the chuckles. But seriously, I know there's been a lot of concern recently about the surveillance nature, the surveillance aspect of what has been proposed by KMPO and the use of various funds. I've heard different sides to this argument, and I think there's still a little bit more that needs to be done with it. The surveillance aspect, most of us cede our ability or our right to privacy by skipping over the end user license agreement when we download apps and use different applications, and we don't realize that's where all the Google traffic information comes from anyway. So a lot of the data that is needed to quote unquote control the flow of traffic is already available. I don't know that we need to spend more money on trying to reduce traffic. Traffic is a byproduct of population. That's all I have. Thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Next is Dan Gukin.
Hi, we on? Good. So let me correct some stuff. The KMPO board, does anyone know how many members there are on the KMPO board? There are 11. And how many of those are elected? 9. So there's nine of us on the KMPO board. Mr. Tyler is here. He is also a board member. He is elected Post Falls Highway Commissioner. So it's what's called a joint powers agency. It's like the government oversight of our county ambulance service, the EMS. It is also an agency. Now they affect your property taxes. KMPO does not. The statement that KMPO is on board with cameras isn't true because we voted against it. We represented you. You showed up, and we let your voices be heard. And Jeff and I were among the first 4 who voted against the Traffic or Transportation Management Center because we heard you, and that's what we do. We represent the people. The KMPO, therefore, since KMPO is mostly, or majority of us, are elected officials, KMPO is no longer on board with traffic cameras. If it came to our board and it's still the same people who are on there, we're going to turn it down. And that's the promise we make to you because we represent you. We do have to be ever vigilant, though. I asked our executive director, Glenn Miles, about traffic cameras and the traffic management system, and I said, Will this be coming back? Because there's a lot of things in government that are vampires. You can't kill them. So is it going to be coming back? He said it could, because the agency that's behind it, that's really pushing it, is the ITD, Idaho Transportation Department. They're the ones who want it. So we must be ever vigilant, and I promise you, as your city councilman, I will continue to be ever vigilant against these things. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Question number 6, surveillance cameras. Many of the roadway cameras that have been developed in Kootenai County over the last few years are being used for traffic detection at intersections. But there are less invasive, more reliable traffic technologies, such as radar, that could be used for this purpose. Therefore, here's the question. What should the policy of your city regarding traffic cameras be going forward? If you believe that video surveillance is sometimes justified, please explain under what conditions, starting with Tom Schaefer.
I'd like to start off answering this question by saying that really this is a matter of convenience, and the onus is on everyone here in this audience. Do you want to have a more convenient lifestyle to give up the potential of personal liberties in the future? And surveillance cameras are part of that. Now, I spent a career designing the technology that goes into these things. And the base stations, which are like that antenna that, or that tower that they protested against. And I can tell you that the technology that has gone into these things is breathtaking, because the fact that you want to have your download rates faster and faster every year is money in their pockets. What 5G promises to do is a quantum leap above what we have right now. And the enabling technologies for that include base stations with an awesome amount of RF radiation power. So this thing here is the same as surveillance cameras of today's technology. And so what I say is I'm against surveillance technology of the level that the technology that goes into these phones, because it's a matter of convenience today, but it will be the keys to your jail tomorrow.
Next is Roger Garlock.
I like this question because the answer is in the question. Do you want to repeat that again?
What should the policy of your city regarding traffic cameras be going forward? If you believe that video surveillance is sometimes justified, please explain under what conditions.
What did you say about the less intrusive? Because that's your answer. Anything that's less intrusive, you mentioned that of less.
Yeah, that was in the preface.
Absolutely. So that's the answer is in the question. You already answered it. It's like, yeah, we don't need to be watched any more than we already are. But when you look at these smart cities, and you look at the technology that goes into them, one, you're creating a system of solutionism. And who's going to pay for that? You know, then you got Google coming in and other companies that Tom might have referenced and stuff like that, because the municipalities aren't going to be able to pay for all this technology to create a smart city. So the solution would be not a burden on the taxpayers and not to sell its residents as a product to another company. So really, no, I'd say 100% absolutely not to surveillance cameras. And then also, let's not forget the presumption of guilt there. Of like, if you're already always being watched, why am I being watched? Did I do something wrong? No, you don't need to watch me. And as Tom mentioned, how many, they always like that safety. I take my shoes off in the airport for the guise of safety. So it's just one more excuse to take our freedoms away and to watch us, and we're the product. And so I would keep them out of our city, for sure.
Thank you, Roger. Christy Wood.
Thank you. I appreciate this question because of my law enforcement background, so I think that's why I got the question. That's great. I want to back up a little bit on the 5G question to just throw my 2 cents in. My opponent, who seems like a really nice guy, he's only ever lived in a smart city. He moved here 17 months ago and from smart cities. And he works for the biggest corporate overlord there is, of Amazon, who absolutely relies on the smart city structure and pushes it all over the world. I think he probably has to use 5G to do his business day to day. So when you make statements and you say what you're going to do on council, I think you should walk the talk. But I do want to get to the surveillance cameras. You know, coming from law enforcement, we did use surveillance cameras. What's important though is how we access them. Are your rights being violated when we do access them? What a lot of people don't know is the data sharing is what's critical. Who can share stuff with us? We cannot, absolutely cannot, just sit and scroll through traffic cameras to see if anybody's doing something naughty. It just doesn't happen. What we have used these traffic cameras for, and it's just the license plate recognition. They're so low res, you really can't see faces. But what we've used them for is abducted children. We've used them for homicides. These things matter. Officers do need to have the tools to protect this community. So I think the most critical thing is, how do you get the data? Who shares the data? And law enforcement absolutely cannot share the data. And many times we have so many layers of protection where you have to get a search warrant before you can even access it. So I think the bigger issue is the private sector. There's no rules in the private sector, and there's plenty of surveillance cameras.
Topic number 3. Central planning and land use. These questions address the issue of central planning. In the past, most cities grew organically along regularly ordered streets. Now, unplanned growth is frowned upon, and even small towns have armies of planners and community developers or development specialists. But their influence on cities is not entirely positive. Perhaps less rather than more central planning would lead to healthier growth. Question number 7, master planned community. Hayden Canyon and Core Terre are both large master planned communities. Both were planned by private corporations without public input and with few links to the rest of the community. Such large planned developments can be controversial, drawn out, and non-transparent way of doing development. The question is, what positive benefits do planned unit developments offer, and why should cities promote them instead of requiring development to be done within the bounds of normal zoning regulations? Starting with Rob Knudsen.
All right, you better get the cutoff sign ready because I'm going to go long on this one. So, my wife and I, in our community, we got our little neighborhood of Indian Meadows involved because of the Core Terre development and because what it started to turn into. We saw the original plans for Core Terre, and I tell you, I would have wanted to live there because they had fly fishing ponds laid out, they had wide open spaces, it looked really nice. When things started to go awry, in conjunction with the updated comprehensive plan, which I agree is very squishy and very open to interpretation, it seemed like some other forces got involved, and that original plan, the original master plan community, became a remastered planned community, and it seemed to have a lot of changes that came along with it, and that's where we took an objection with that. You can only take those things so far. Can they be developed to be attractive? Can they be a place that you'd want to raise a family? Absolutely. But the things that get carved out of that kind of planning, specifically in our case, we were very interested in traffic flow. The excuses that come along with the proposal and the approval of those kinds of development fall along the lines of, well, we'll study it later. And I think that's unacceptable. So it's not just the community, the master plan community itself. It's other forces that come to play. I think if people come out publicly, get involved in the government process and the public process, public testimony, public comment, these types of things should be elevated into the view of the public.
Thank you, Rob.
Saw my sign. Thank you.
Christy Wood.
Well, thank you. This is a good question. I, too, voted against Core Terre for a lot of the reasons that Rob's talked about. But you know, that was probably the largest community turnout over and over and over, with people who live in that community really telling us their stories about how this is going to impact their lives in particular. And you couldn't sit there and not be impacted by it. I agreed with them. I thought the planning that would interrupt an established neighborhood just so somebody else could have a neighborhood in the future was wrong. And so I did not support it. I know what the impact's going to be, and I'm sad that it was approved. Again, it's not because the developers are the bad guys. It's just that it had such an impact on existing neighborhoods. The PUDs, they don't come to council. They will if people appeal, but very few people appeal. So council does not oversee those. But I am sad about Cortair. I wish we could have done something differently. And I think as we go along in that process, we will have an opportunity to have more input.
Thank you. Luke Summer.
Just to go back to the point I made about the CAMPO, I did not say that there were not electeds on the CAMPO. I said the CAMPO was not elected. There's a difference. With the planned communities and the land use, Hayden Canyon is something in Hayden that has been objected to for years and years and years. And council approved it. They brought it forward. On Lancaster and Highway 95, if you go over past government and just drive to that little community, you will see small lots cramming people together. And when you increase your density per acre, you increase how many cars you will have. You increase the traffic, therefore, that goes down our roadways. So growth is inevitable? No. Right now, growth is inevitable here. If you do a YouTube search for cities in Maine, all kinds of stories about the cities going from 10,000 to 6,000 and all of the negative economic consequences that come from that. We cannot assume forever into the future that we will grow and that we will continue to bring in heavy taxes, that we will be able to sustain all of the development that's coming along. The comprehensive plan that I've read, the 2020 comprehensive plan. I'm working my way through the 2008 comprehensive plan, which is based largely on the 1995 comprehensive plan. Those comprehensive plans are mandated by the state to be researched, I think, into 17 different areas, and that's fine. But it's so poorly put together that I think we need to revisit that. Thank you.
Thank you, Luke. Question number 8, urban renewal agencies. Both Coeur d'Alene and Hayden have urban renewal agencies that are funded by local property taxes in order to build infrastructure for private development. The question is, what is your view of the pros and cons of urban renewal agencies, and what role do you see for them in the future of your city? Please mention your view of specific future projects in your response, starting with Clark Albritton.
Okay, got them all. The issue of the urban renewal that you just brought up, agencies, is the fact that they're mandated, but yet we aren't entirely sure what level of insider knowledge of the citizens have or access to the projects that are going to relate. And maybe those who are insiders get to know that, and they get to know where to invest in advance of that. So that would be inappropriate, and I would certainly scrutinize that. Cortair has been brought up several times, which is not urban renewal. I'm talking about the one that was just mentioned for 15th that's coming up. This is something where the citizens need to have transparency and transparent access to what's being done in advance as early as possible and as broadly spread as possible, so that they know too what's going on and what level of input they can have with the council and how to affect those agencies. You may know that, but in the course of the past several cycles that have gone on, I haven't been informed until it was, in the press, and then I'm finding out that way. And so the input of the people and that sort of thing needs to precede deployment and spending that's associated and the properties that are involved. Obviously, there's a benefit in making sure that outlying communities and communities that have not been brought into current state, that needs to be looked at. I mean, it's something that is a valuable process. It's not something that I'm saying isn't necessary, but it is something that the citizens need to have more advanced knowledge and engagement in than I think is evident now.
Thank you, Clark. All right, Dan English.
Thank you. I am on the Coeur d'Alene Urban Renewal Board, Ignite CDA, just recently reappointed by Mayor Hammond for another 4-year term. When I look at, it's been controversial at times. There's been some wonderful projects in Coeur d'Alene that you can point to and look to, around the library, McEwen Field, different things. And some of the projects that, kind of on the potential drawing board, there's been talk off and on about East Sherman, but there's, there doesn't seem to be any real community drive for that. A year or so ago, we created a, hospital district around Kootenai Health, and there's some potential there. One of the things that, I really like in our whole, I love to see it, is like an overpass, one more overpass over the freeway, kind of by Kootenai, like they did with the Greens Ferry Bridge in Post Falls. So it's, and I will say, we have those meetings there completely, televised stuff's out there ahead of time, and we have virtually nobody comes and shows up. I think the only meetings that get less attendance are our annual budget hearings. So if people are worried about, spending the money and all of that, you've got to do your part. Come to meetings, and thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Next, Tom Schaefer.
Okay, I'm going to channel my inner nerd on this one. I'm an engineer and I love numbers. And I'd love to get up and pace while I answer this question. So, I'll just stand up and I'll emote with my hands. I went and actually looked at the Kootenai County Treasurer's tax records, and I compared and contrast businesses inside the Hayden Urban Renewal Agency and those outside. I'm going to bring up two. The first one we all know, which is Walmart. Walmart last year paid roughly $110,000 in total taxes. Of that, $80,000 went to the Hayden Urban Renewal Agency. Another business, Cafe Meister, for those of you folks who live up in our neck of the woods, great coffee, by the way, they paid roughly $4,000 in taxes. None of it went to the Hayden Urban Renewal Agency because they're not inside HURA, Hayden Urban Renewal Agency. Guess how much Walmart paid to the city of Hayden in taxes? About $870. Guess how much Cafe Meister paid? About $800. Okay, so here's my point. The current tax structure for the Urban Renewal Agencies basically skims a bunch of money off the top for purposes of urban renewal. But what that does is that shifts the burden of the other taxing districts off on people outside of the Urban Renewal Agency and even the county as well, because taxes pay for sheriff, city, county, highways, community network library, school board, the schools. And so sorry, I'm on a roll here. The board of HURA is an unaccountable, unelected body of people making star chamber decisions about what goes on inside HURA. The current executive director of HURA is the former community development planner for the city of Hayden. Okay, connect the dots. It's problematic at best. And that's all I got to say on this.
Thanks, Tom. Question number 9 is also for Coeur d'Alene only. This has to do with the CDA 2030. When Coeur d'Alene decided to develop a new comprehensive plan, it collaborated with CDA 2030, a private community planning organization, instead of assigning the task to city employees. As a private agency, CDA 2030 planners could meet with major developers without transparency or public records. Do you believe that the close involvement of a private, unaccountable agency in the development of Coeur d'Alene's comprehensive plan was ethical or against the principles of Idaho's open meeting laws, starting with Brian Winkler?
Testing, okay. So what I'll say about CDA 2030 is, yeah, it's a nonprofit, and I think the city pays it $40,000 a year, if I'm not mistaken. 25, says Dan. But no, I mean, I've read 40. We could debate that at another time. But yeah, it's a nonprofit, and if you look at CDA 2030, it lines up perfectly with the UN Agenda 2030, and it's all the same jargon. And so, and I would challenge anyone too. If anyone says, oh, that's a conspiracy theory, go to the UN's website and search for it, and there's probably a 50-page document that you can download on PDF. Just right here, UN Handbook on Smart Urban Innovations. Perfect example right there. But what I'd say about the CDA 2030 is I do think they have a higher agenda, and I do think they're coming in and implementing a global agenda in our community. And yeah, I do think that that's something that violates the standards that we set in this community, and I do think that this should be more community driven. And if I'm elected, I want to look at all the money we're spending on NGOs, dark money organizations, and consultancies. And so yeah, I do think we should be more authentically engaged with the public and not some global NGO.
Thank you, Brian. Next is Dan Gukin.
Yeah, so 2030, you hear a lot of talk where people will say things about our community values and how important they are. And CDA 2030 was created exactly for that purpose, to find out what the community values were. It was a survey, it was a program that happened way back in 2013. And then it morphed into something else. It kept on going. And I wanted to get rid of it. And I tried every year at the budgeting process to unfund 2030. I tried again this year, and I was unsuccessful at unfunding 2030 because they are becoming this, exactly as Brian said, they're not really accountable because they were doing a lot of things for our planning department, and I pointed this out. When they first were going to contract to them to do the work, I said, we need to do the work in-house. We could bring 2030 in-house, make it a government committee, make it applicable to all the transparency laws and open meeting laws. And the mayor at the time disagreed with me. So I did fight for that. Regarding the 17 points in the UN document, and it's true, there are 17 issues that have to be covered. We are required by state law to put that in our comprehensive plan. I talked to Casey about that. And when I looked at it and I saw that it was in Idaho State Code, and we have representatives in there, I see Tony Wisniewski here. I called up Mary Souza, who was my senator at the time, and I said, can you believe this UN stuff is in state code? Can you change it? So that's a question you need to ask your legislators, because we take our orders from them. So if you want to get that fixed, I've been working on fixing 2030, and I'm going to continue to do that. If you want it fixed, that other stuff, those 17 points, you talk to your legislators and you get them to fix it. Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Roger Garlock.
Yeah, it's not working. Fix it, let's just get rid of it. This is something I talked about a couple years ago. As Dan mentioned, 2030 is not new, and like all government things, it morphs into something ugly. And they may take $20,000 now. It's been as high as $70,000 in the past. And there's city councilmen that have been on that board, as well as developers. A little correction, developers and construction workers are two different people. I work with construction workers. I talk to them every morning. Everything we've talked about right here, they are against it 100%. Developers don't really have faces. Do we know anybody? Do we know the developers? Has anybody ever been to a 2030 meeting? No. It's this little secret organization that takes taxpayer monies, whether it's 20,000, 70,000, it doesn't matter. It needs to go away. They've done their job. Let's get it out of here, whether it's through the state, through the city. We can defund them at the city level. But yeah, let's take a look at the state level as well and get rid of it. It's a homogenization of our cities. It destroys our culture. They want every town. It's globalization. They want us to look like some city in France, some city in Seattle, wherever. It needs to go. And so really your answer is yes. Again, the answer was in the question, and you asked a yes or no question. Yes is the answer to your question.
Thank you, Roger. Topic number 4, this will be the last topic, general government. These questions cover a variety of topics related to city government. Question number 10, state laws restricting options for city government. When citizens ask city leaders why they don't do more to control growth, address traffic congestion, or to make developers pay for new infrastructure, they are often told that the city's hands are tied because of state laws or regulations. The question is, what changes do you think could be made at the state level in terms of land use laws, reallocation of taxes, property rights considerations, or other regulations that would make your city easier to govern? Starting with Tom Schaefer.
So one of the things I've campaigned on is keep the feds in the state out of local business to the greatest extent possible. And what Roger just said and what Dan Gookin just said is true, is that there are existing laws and statutes at the state level that force the hand of our communities here. Mr. Gookin talked about the comprehensive plan, but then there's also the urban renewal agencies. That framework is built around state statute, and I question why is it even necessary. I think it should be at the county, or at the county and the city level where we decide how we want to grow. And the other one is impact fees. So part of this monster that we all have to confront daily, growth, is who gets to pay for it. We can't avoid growth, but certainly we should let market forces take control here. And I think that, developers should pay the appropriate amount to carry the burden on growth rather than the taxpayers. So one of the things right now is there's a limit on impact fees that can be applied to future developments. And so, when I'm elected, I'll have that advocacy inside the city of Hayden, but then through knowing colleagues that are currently serving on the Senate and the House at the state level, I will try to articulate for changing in state laws that affect things that I just discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Dan Gookin.
Hello. So there was a statement that Governor Little made a few months ago, maybe it was a year ago, where he said, "We really support local control." At which point I was reading it on my computer and I went, it's just not true. They don't. They really want it. We call it the Kingdom of Ada. They pretty much rule the rest of the state. A case in point, and they back off on a lot of growth issues and a lot of local planning issues. I mean, other than the 17 UN points that are in the state statutes that we have to obey for a comp plan, which actually makes the comp plan more expensive and more complicated. And it gives a lot of ex-government employees a job too. That's another thing. You have to hire a consultant. They have monkeyed with the way we do our budget. Now, I don't like paying property taxes. I've never voted for a property tax increase. Never, ever, ever. Because I can always find money in the budget. But they changed the rules on us. And they allowed us, growth can't pay for itself in Idaho anymore. Because our state legislature capped the amount of new growth we can take at 90%. And that means that 10% of our new growth in this city has to be shouldered on us who already live here. Your state legislature did that. They also monkeyed with the formula we could take from urban renewal. So they talk all this glorious stuff about urban renewal. That urban renewal district closed. Our city would have gotten $3 million of extra revenue, more tax dollars that was going to urban renewal, just like Tom said. You know, that Walmart closes up there, and that $80,000 he's talking about, that's not going to go to Hayden because our state legislature monkeyed with the system. And that's what needs to be fixed. If you want to do that, if you want to see fewer property tax increases, the county took 3%, the city took 3%. You want to see less of that 3%, we got to get the state legislature to give us back our local control. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Clark Albritton.
I think we have this figured out now. You know, this gets to a fundamental principle of governance, and that is pushing the point of governance close to the people. Did any of you see the story about Biden releasing grizzly bears in Washington, in some town? It reminded me of some time ago when the federal government decided that we needed to repopulate wolves all over, you know, the West here in Wyoming. And I thought, well, gee, why not just put them in Central Park? But the point of the matter is, there's a lot less people in Wyoming to complain than there would be in Central Park. And so, you know, we bear the brunt of that. Idaho is a big state. It's a really big state. And to have the Kingdom of Ada decide, micromanaging what revenues and taxes and use fees they're going to take out of Coeur d'Alene and take control over budget and planning processes and keep them there so that we get more uniformity. Again, it takes the actual governance, the spending of the money, and the execution of the services that the people need. It puts it in the hands of somebody far away. And then we have an unaccountable city council that says, I can't do anything because all the money controls down there. Obviously, we need to figure out, I saw the gas tax thing, how the majority of that goes into state and feds, of course, and none of it stays local. This is something that we obviously have to work with the legislature on. We have a conservative House in Idaho, and we should at least be able to affect some change there with a liaison with them on how we can get more local control. So I would certainly work toward that.
Thank you, Clark. Question number 11, appointing people to boards and commissions, and this question is for Coeur d'Alene only. One of the jobs of the City Council is to appoint people to boards and commissions. Some appointments are not controversial, but in the case of Coeur d'Alene Urban Renewal Agency and the Planning and Zoning Commission, appointments have a direct say in community development, so they are significant. What do you consider good qualifications for Urban Renewal or Planning Commission appointees? Starting with Roger Garlock.
Some diversity on those commissions would be nice. Really, the commissions are just another example of you know, the public being involved, and you know, that's their recommendations. You know, some other, when you look at commissions, it's an example of the generational cronyism, rubber stamp approval of the people. Some of the more controversial, I mean, we're talking about growth, but at the city level, the library is in the public eye quite a bit, Coeur d'Alene Library, the Arts Commission, and you just continue to have the same people on these boards. We had an art commissioner laughing at the public, sat there laughing because the public was speaking out against art. I tried to get on that art commission a couple times, but my diversity of thought apparently wasn't good enough for our former mayor, Steve Widmeyer. You know, and we just had a library. When you look at the library, and I know Sheriff Norris was just in the newspaper recently about the libraries, and the Coeur d'Alene Public Library is an issue. You've had somebody that has been on that commission for 46 years, you know, and they're just rubber stamped through. Are we actually looking at every candidate as they come through? We really need some diversity. It's you, the public, that would make up these commissions. So when you say qualifications, it's really who wants to do it. It's your voice is the qualification. The public is that qualification. That's a tricky question. You'll hear that a lot. Hey, what qualifies you for city council? I'm over the age 18. That's what qualifies me. You know, we got to step away from that. And you know, we're a top. This isn't a top-down government. It's a bottom-up government. It's the people in these towns. It's the people who walk the streets, punch a clock, talk to their neighbors. Those are the people we need to put on those commissions. That's their qualification, is they live here every day and they see the impacts of these commissions and local government.
Thank you, Roger. Dan English.
Thank you. Over my time, I've been elected to a number of positions, and I've been appointed to different boards and commissions, including the urban renewal. And most of the time, I can truly say that there's a pretty good balance, because you got to have some young and old and male and female, and some folks who have been around for a while, and some folks who are always healthy to have new ideas too. With the Urban Renewal Commission and some other ones like that, they do deal with some pretty technical things. So and on ours, we've got some people who have some expertise in that area. And again, when I think of other ones, I think that's a value of having some appointed boards too, is that you need to have some actual, people with expertise and experience in that. And so that's good. On the other hand, I remember when, the county went through the optional forms of county government exercise a few years back, and I absolutely believe that, the positions that are elected there, they were put in, our Constitution and statute from the beginning, and there's a reason for that. And the level of accountability that you have as an elected person, there's just no comparison. How many of you know, who your health and welfare director is for here? You probably don't know, but you certainly know who we are, and you know how to find us. Thank you.
I can just jump in. Okay. I was waiting for the thumbs up. Appointing qualified individuals to commissions, I think it represents where I'm coming from as a guy off the street. This is my first time, running for elected office, and maybe it shows. Maybe my campaign signs aren't the best and brightest, red, white, and blue, and so forth, but that doesn't matter. I'm willing to do this, and I think if you're going to be appointed to a commission, that's the first step. You want to volunteer yourself. Are you qualified? Well, there are some people who probably will be able to judge that. I think one of the drawbacks of people who are appointed to commission, at least in the public eye, if you're appointed to a commission who's overseeing an urban development, how closely are you affiliated with a development outfit out of Seattle or some other big city? I think we want to appoint people who are qualified, who are local, and don't give the appearance that there's some sort of prejudgment coming into play that's going to come here and tell us what we want our community to look like. And it may not be what we want, it's what they want. So the only way to do this is to get involved, volunteer, put your name out there, and if you're qualified, you go for it, because I think people will back you up. I know people here in Idaho like things that are from Idaho. They like services that are from Idaho. And I'm not from Idaho. Now I am. I wasn't before. But there's a reason people want to come here, and it's not just because of the snow. So put yourself out there. I did. It's weird and uncomfortable, but man, is it educational. Do it.
Thank you, Rob. Last question. The future of manufactured homes. For generations, manufactured home facilities have been a practical solution for Idaho's low-income families. Manufactured homes are declining, but still make up a significant portion of both CDA and Hayden households. Yet they are rarely discussed as a solution for North Idaho's housing problem. The question is, what do you see as the prospects for residents of manufactured homes in CDA over the long term, and would you consider city ordinances that would protect existing manufactured home residents? Luke Sumner.
Well, I won't address CDA, I will address Hayden. We have a number of mobile home communities in the city of Hayden. Some are in exceptionally great condition. Mobile home communities are sometimes the first level of opportunity that people have to buy a home of their own. My first was in 1982. I bought a 14 by 68 manufactured home. That was the beginning of my entry level. And I moved up to a half duplex and then bought another duplex, etc. The manufactured homes in the city of Hayden, sometimes you've got some that are run down. And in one case in particular, I want to bring up the villas of Carrington over on Hayden Avenue. They put up 144 apartments after having, from what I understand, raised the mobile home community that was there. And 144, as you may know, is a gross in mathematical terms. The apartments they put up are great. I got the figures from what they're renting for, $1,375 a month to $1,795 per month. That's what they're charging for affordable housing. The examples of the village or the villa over there at Carrington, I think is a great example of increasing density. If you take those 144 apartments and give 2 cars per apartment, you've got 288 cars that are entering onto Hayden Avenue. And if you have those 288 cars entering the Hayden Avenue or the roadway, you've got more traffic, more problems that come from growth. And that is something that is a problem, I think, all through the county. Now, the mobile homes themselves, if we're going to take away any of the mobile home communities that are there, we need to make sure that the people that are there have a place that they can go. There have been situations where they have been left destitute.
Thank you, Luke. Christy Wood?
Thank you. Well, the answer is yes, I would support protections for mobile homeowners. It is obviously an affordable housing option. And one of the, I guess, a mobile home that I look at every single day, I drive on Howard Street, I head over to Fred Meyer, I head to Grocery Outlet. There's a mobile home there that has a horse. And I love looking at what they've done with that. And so many people used to call and complain, oh, that poor horse. And I think there was a lot of judgment going on that was unwarranted. I'm a very private person, even though I've been out in the public a lot. And I understand people probably don't know a lot about me. I don't use social media. I have a campaign Facebook site, but it's just not what I spend my time on. I'm not into it. So I know that people don't know a lot about me, but I got an email a couple months ago from someone who had got a parking ticket, and they were fired up and really upset that they had to pay this parking ticket. And so they said to me that I was going to go home tonight to my mansion because I was elitist and, drive my Rolls Royce to get there. And I thought, wow, on a cop's salary, I became an elitist. That's amazing to me. Not only that, I grew up in the woods above Hauser Lake in a single wide trailer with my siblings, and my father built onto it so that we'd have plenty of room. I never will have an issue with people that live in mobile homes. I don't look down upon them. My parents worked very hard to take good care of us, and I'm proud of what they did provide for us. So I don't have any preconceived notions about mobile homes. I think that they're necessary, and people provide a home for their family. It doesn't matter what it looks like.
Thank you. Brian Winkler.
I would say I have similar sentiments. I think it's, we should protect those people and we should protect those communities, and anything that allows a family to move into a starter home, I think that's a good thing. And, I do think affordable housing is, in regard to mobile homes, it's a good option for people who don't make that much income and are working their way up, to maybe buy a bigger home one day. So yeah, I mean, and some of them, are very presentable and look very nice. And I know there's been some problems with mobile home communities up in Hayden, and that takes away from the sheriff's resources just because of there's been some upheavals and some crime. And we definitely want to solve those issues as well. But in general, yeah, I'm a supporter of families being able to move into their first starter home and have a place to live and a solid community.
I wasn't prepared. Thank you very much for everybody attending tonight. I'm going to start off by okay, good. I'm going to start off by saying that my opponent, who didn't show up tonight, he made a very nice comment about no smart cameras, no technology. But really, that's the final nail in the coffin as far as I'm concerned. It's all the stuff that comes before us, before that, herding us into highly dense, congested urban areas, which really sets us up for all these enabling technologies to track and to literally restrict our freedoms. And so my opponent, this past Tuesday, he voted to use eminent domain to take away private property in order to complete a road project, which on one hand might seem a good idea, which is it improved our convenience of travel, which is really what smart cities and the KMPO all was sold to us was. It gives us more convenience. But as I said before, are you literally handing over the keys to the jailer? And so, in closing, I just want to say that I am for the smallest amount of government that gets the job done, that respects private property rights, and gets away from the notion that if we just sell everybody a piece of convenience, that we'll make them happy and they'll go away, and then we'll do all the nasty business in the background.
That's Tom Schaefer, seat number 3 for Hayden City Council. Next is Luke Summer for Hayden Mayor.
16 years on City Council, Tom's opponent. 8 years on planning and zoning in the city of Hayden. They campaign on experience. They do have experience. That's why I'm running. It's not the right kind of experience. I have been exposed to many things in my life, at least four major economic booms, where we've seen the same kinds of things that we're seeing now here. I've been to the International Institute of Human Rights, which is a UN-funded organization, not because I agreed with them, but because the law school I attended for one semester back in 1985, the dean suggested it so that we would understand what the opponents believe. And I got a good taste of that. My experience has been one where I've seen the other side. I've seen the experience that they have, and I don't like it. What I want to do is I want to bring growth into proper perspective, increasing the ability to manage our traffic flow, and then clarify a lot of the transparency issues on City Council. There are things that need to be done that aren't being done, things that are being done that need not to be done. And sometimes the only way to get things fixed is to put somebody in there who knows how to stop it. Thank you.
Next, we have the Coeur d'Alene City Council challenger, starting with Rob Knutson for seat number 5.
All right. Since I haven't stood up yet tonight, I'm going to do it just to prove that I may be the tallest candidate running for seat number 5. You probably heard it said before, maybe in the context of sports, up your game. Well, that's what I've been doing this past year, upping my game. I've been involved in city council meetings and participating in planning commission meetings now for a better part of a year, or actually more than a year. And I've faithfully attended those. I've been to almost as many meetings as the incumbent, Dan English. Maybe more meetings than Roger has attended. But that's not the point. The point is, I'm stepping up, I'm stepping in it, potentially. The namesake, my website, my campaign website, sounds offensive, but it's not. But it follows the theme of standing up and upping my game. It's upyourpanhandle.com. It's an offensive-sounding website about an unoffensive candidate, but one who's got some pretty strong opinions. So I suggest you check that out. One of the things that I've done over the past year or so, I've actually analyzed all the roll call votes of City Council over every resolution. I've been through every set of meeting minutes, which is excruciatingly painful but it's very informative. You see how our local government works. And what I want to finish with is you can see how public involvement makes a difference. A few weeks ago, there was a woman during public comment who got up to the microphone and made a suggestion. Can we please make a switch on the agenda? Can we comment before the consent calendar is approved? Now, that's just a batch of things that get voted on in one lump vote. But it made a difference because the next meeting, the mayor switched up the agenda. And I think it proves a point that you've got to get involved in local governance. I'm doing it, and I hope you will too. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Next is Roger Garlock, also for City Council, seat number 5.
Okay, I don't know. There's a lot of people in this audience that know me, and they know that they could probably tell by looking at me I'm a little fired up tonight. Not really making any jokes because I don't think this is a laughing matter. These issues have been plaguing our city for years. And when we talk about stepping up, I stepped up immediately 20 years ago. Problems with growth did not start a year ago with Cortera. They've been going on for a long, long time. As long as that gentleman down there has been on the city council. I don't understand how he's missed them, whether it's impact fees, high density rezoning, whatever it may be, somebody needed to say something about it. We've had a council, whether it's Dan being the only one voting for certain things, there needs to be more votes, more representation of the public. When we talk about stepping up, I stepped up politically 5 years ago, but I stepped up from the community from the moment I got here. I've been working with vulnerable populations for 20 years. I left doing that to go work with in construction. So where I'm at, my attendance is with all of you every day. Whether I'm there at school board meetings, when they're abusing our children, mass shutting down businesses, I've been there the whole time for 20 years. And we've pointed a lot of fingers tonight, whether it's at the state, city councils, but really it lies with all of us. And so it's time to, on November 7th, to elect somebody who is a representative of the public and has been with the public for a long time. And when we talk about state, lucky me, I have every local state representative and senator on my phone. I'm friends with them, I know them. When something comes up in Coeur d'Alene, I can give them a call. It's that type of partnership, whether in politics and with the public. So November 7th, vote for Roger Garlock for seat number 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Next, for seat number 3, we have Clark Albritton.
Thank you. Yes, I've lived in this community for 24 years now. I bought homes here. I paid property tax. I've seen it go up stunningly. I've had children in the public schools here. I've had to put them into our church schools because of, the adequacies there. So all the things that affect you have affected me as well. We have tenured city council members that have been there a very long time. And regardless of how they may have voted occasionally against the group, now running with the group, I'm not sure which we're going to get after the election, but the bottom line is I think we need a clean sweep because the future in front of us is dangerous. We have danger signs on what is going to happen in this city going forward with the growth, the smart city issue that you brought up, and all the planning issues, getting it local, et cetera. We have the same team that's been in place for a very long time, and yet it's business as usual. So my recommendation is make a change and put in people that will represent the interest of the citizens and the voters. And that's where, you need more than one vote to do that. You need 3 votes or more to do that. So vote for me on November 7th, Clark Albritton, and I appreciate your time and your attention.
Thank you, Clark. Next, we have for seat number 1, Coeur d'Alene City Council, Brian Winkler.
Yeah, so to echo what Clark said about just the times that we're living in right now and just the seriousness of the times we're living in and just what's going on in the world. And you look at, we're talking about smart cities, which is very corporate driven. And when you look at just how the Fortune 500 have evolved in this country, right? If you go to any Fortune 500 company and you look up the top institutional investors, it's all the same people. It's BlackRock, Vanguard, and State Street. And then when you go to their website, they all own each other. So this is absolutely an agenda that's being driven top down, and that's why we're seeing the smart cities. And yeah, I have worked for large conglomerates. IBM, I worked for IBM. In fact, I sold consulting services to utilities, and that's why I know, to do smart meters, right? And that's why I know how expensive it is, right? A smart meter project at a big utility has a team of consultants, and that can be over $100 million. And that's why I'm curious to know how much we're paying the consultants that are in our city government right now. But it's given me a perspective. I work for Amazon Web Services right now. It's just given me a perspective. If you look at how things have evolved since COVID, everything is moving towards centralization, towards monopoly capital, and that's a very serious, it's a very dangerous thing. And that's the definition of fascism. And so, but doing these things, it's given me a perspective, and it's also given me the ability to move here and invest in this community. And, I've been here 24 months now, and I'm here, and I don't want to see this place go the way of San Francisco, the way of Seattle, but you see the warning signs, and it's going the same, that's where we're heading. So, I think we need to focus on local businesses, the people. And yeah, I'm here to stay, and vote for me on November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Next, we have the Coeur d'Alene City Council incumbents, starting with Dan English for seat number 5.
Okay. Well, I was born and raised here in Coeur d'Alene. About 3 generations before me were here, and now our kids and grandkids and 2 great-grandsons are around here. So I've seen it over the long haul. I've always been somebody who is involved in the community. In just my 20s, I got elected to Coeur d'Alene School Board, and I'm sure it was kind of a shock to some of the teachers who walked into one of those meetings and said, "What is that guy doing there on the board?" And, he was just a bare C student. But I have been actively involved with that. I've done a lot of nonprofit work, started Youth for Christ chapter here, Anchor House, and speaking of housing, work for Habitat for Humanity and a few different ones. And yeah, I have a lot of experience, being elected. I was county clerk for about 15 years, and now it'll be about 10 years on the city council. But the beauty of America is that anybody, who, is resident and that kind of thing, you too can run for office. And so, I applaud everybody here that is willing to do that. And if I get the most votes, then I'm going to keep doing the job. If I don't, I will gracefully, hand over my pass key. So, anyway, I appreciate you all, and thank you for coming out.
Thank you, Dan. It'll be Dan Gukin for seat number 3 next.
Thank you. I really want to thank you for putting on this forum. This is great. So thank you for giving us the opportunity and giving the public the opportunity. I turned off my notes. I wanted to say that I wanted to thank everyone for being up here. It takes a lot to run for a public office. You suffer the slings and arrows, but you shape the debate. So even if you don't win, you've actually changed things. It's very important to run for office. Roger, if you were appointed to a commission, you should let me know, because I'll go to bat for you. I did for Kara Claridge when she wanted to be on the library board, and they didn't appoint her, so I voted against that one, because I agree we need more variety on our committees. That's why I vote no on a lot of the appointments. We have 50,000 people who lived here, and we need to have them on our committees. Be very careful when you talk about slow growth, because there is a balance between growth and housing prices. You slow growth and the housing prices go up. That's something we should always keep in mind. Also, make sure that during this election that you focus a lot on facts and not fear. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of stuff that's being said here, suppositions, and this may happen, this may not happen. It's easy to be scared. The government works overtime to make us scared, and the TV news makes us scared. There's a lot of scary things out there. But what we need to do is we need to pay attention to the data, and we need to look at what really happened and what could happen. There was talk earlier where someone said, and this ties into a lot of what's going on with the 5G stuff, which I opposed. Unfortunately, I was the only one who did. We talk about protection of health and safety of our citizens is a role of the government, and you all applauded for that. And then we said that as someone up here said, fundamental health and safety comes first, and you all applauded for that, and that's really important. But remember, they used the same argument to lock you down and to make you wear a mask and to close your business. You gotta be damn sure that when someone is elected, that they're not gonna use that excuse against you. I opposed the mandates, I opposed the lockdowns, and that's my role, is to represent your rights. Please vote for me on November 7th. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. And last, we have Christy Wood for seat number 1, Coeur d'Alene City Council.
Thank you. Well, I'm just finishing up my 4th year, but I've already explained that I do have decades of experience and investment in this community. I was happy to come here tonight because I have personally met with both Teresa and Jen to talk about smart cities and what their concerns are. And I'm really not, I don't think they're kooks, first of all, they're not. And they agreed that this wasn't a partisan issue, this is a people issue.
Right.
And I'm on board with that. I have a lot more in common with them than they probably think. I drive a 2008 SUV with no camera system, no Bluetooth, nothing really. I've got a CD player, but I need a new car desperately, but I can't bring myself to get it done because I don't want to learn all the new technology, and I don't want the car to know more about me than I know about it. So I've been dragging my feet. I also have a 1998 little crappy Mercedes, but they get me around. I just think that when I hear all this rhetoric about Coeur d'Alene's going to become just like San Francisco, no, it's not. We're not letting that happen, not at all. My voice on the council has been 100% about fully funding public safety, your police and fire. That doesn't mean I want a police state, but I absolutely know what it takes to keep this community crime-free. And if you look around, you're not seeing homeless camps, you're not seeing graffiti, gangs on the streets. You're not seeing excessive violent crime. You want to know why? That's because we put our money where it matters. We fully fund our police department. And because of that, they have reduced crime in this community by 64%. That matters. We don't want to look like Spokane. We want to look like Coeur d'Alene, my home. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. And I apologize for that email the other day also. So. just kidding. In closing, we just want to say thank you to everybody. None of these guys had to be here tonight, so we appreciate all of you. If we could give them a round of applause just to say thank you. Stop Smart Cities would like to thank all of the candidates that have come here to participate. Everyone can go into the foyer for a meet and greet with the candidates, and also check out the latest edition of the People's Pen for its article on defeating the KMPO Traffic Management Center. And if you have not signed up for the Stop Smart Cities emails, you can go to their table out there in the foyer and sign up.